My name is Margaret Ballard now. I was called Turnbull and lived in Kendall Street from birth in 1952 until around 1968 when my mother, who survived my father's death in 66, we had the shop on the corner of Kendall Street and Shadongate. So many happy memories of playing in that area, of having the fortunate situation of just going across the road to school, so you fell out of bed at 10 to 9 and you were in school for 9. But even more vivid memories of playing in the factory yard. There were a number of kids who were around at that time, some of whom lived in houses which I assume belonged to the factory, and so we would go in and there would be a Tarzan swing in one of the stores where the bales of wool were stored, and I can still remember the smell, the oily smell of the wool. And so we'd have a swing on the Tarzan swing and fall onto the bale of wool. Occasionally see the odd rat running round, which didn't really put us off, but it was an exciting, but at the same time, I guess, by today's standards, a dangerous sort of place to play. But I don't ever remember being told off by anybody official in the factory yard that we shouldn't be there. So, and they would know we were there. So it was a bit of an adventure playground, let's put it like that. But coming back after all these years, and I have done periodically, it's very difficult to imagine and remember exactly what was where. The milk marketing board isn't there anymore. The shop, which was our shop, which was a grocer's shop, is now, or was rather, a bookies. It has been turned into, I think, a separate flat. And one interesting thing I learned a few years ago was it was on Homes Under the Hammer. And apparently the building is a flying freehold because the downstairs part of the house, or some of the downstairs part, has got somebody else's house on the first floor, our next door neighbours. So that was just interesting. Thinking about Colgate School, just across the road, I think it was such a nice school and I enjoyed learning, but I also liked a lot of the teachers, and I think that's why I wanted to become a teacher, because they seemed to have such a nice way with children and encouraged learning. The headmistress at the time, who I guess is no longer with us, was Miss Slater. My favourite teacher was Mrs. Graham, who encouraged me when I got up into the junior end of the school to come down and work with the little ones, because she had the reception class. And so that kind of built on my sort of thoughts about becoming a teacher. But I didn't want to work with little ones. They were much too fussy. We had great fun having a garden up where the prefabs were, where we had lunch. I mean, all that's coming back into vogue now, but we did it back in the day, back in the 50s, where you had a garden that you worked over and you learned about plants and you grew things and that sort of thing. We were quite active sports-wise as well. We had a winning netball team. Musically, the chap who taught the fourth year, Mr. Thompson, he took us to music festivals, and in my last year at junior school, I think we wiped the boards in Carlisle with recorder and choir and then netball and athletics. So it was quite a success, albeit quite a school that was quite small. It did quite well. Memories of walking down Shadongate from school to go to the sheep mount, which is where we would have our sports day. It was quite a long walk in those days, little ones, and then you had to perform once you got there. But we had obviously boundless energy. But another memory is of going past the brewery and just getting that taste in your mouth of the hops or the barley or whatever it was, and it wouldn't leave your mouth. It wasn't pleasant. I heard somebody describe Colgate School on, I think it must have been Facebook fairly recently, as quite as having quite a lot of deprived children there. Now that didn't stick in my memory at all. Yes, there was the odd one who you recognised as maybe not the same as us, but in no way would I describe it as a school that had a lot of deprived children in it. And they also had a lot of very bright children there who went on to the grammar school and to the high school. I went to the Crichton Margaret School, so I clearly wasn't as bright as some of them. I guess having moved away from Kendall Street in 1968-ish and moving up to Wigton Road, I didn't keep in touch with people who I'd lived beside. And in fact, some of them had actually moved. A good friend, Olive Clark, who lived in Kendall Street, in the early 60s, I guess, moved up to Harrowby, somewhere up there. Now, here's the thing. How old would I be? Maybe 9, 10, 11, something like that. I'd get the bus on a Saturday from Colgate up into town, get on another bus, go to Harrowby, be there all day, and in the summer holidays we were down at the river doing all goodness knows what, we didn't do anything that was unsafe, but I don't think my mother knew where I was most of the day. She knew I was at Olive's, but obviously didn't know what we were getting up to. And so we're talking about a different world back in the late 50s, early 60s in terms of kids fending for themselves and going out and experiencing things, playing and, doing some things which I think if I knew my daughter had been doing it, I would have been slightly worried. But, we lived to tell the tale. With the advent of Facebook, it's nice to be able to hook up with people who have been in your past a long time ago, and it's nice to see them still going. In fact, one of the girls who I hooked up with, she used to work in the factory shop until she retired in just in the last couple of years, Barbara Belcher, who lived down Charlotte Street, somewhere down there, and I didn't know that she had a famous brother who played on sax for Jerry Rafferty in Baker Street. So that that was interesting. Somebody from Carlisle has really made it. And one of the other things that had never been brought to my attention till about 4 or 5 years ago was the fact that Linton's tweeds was such a forerunner in the fashion industry because of Coco Chanel. She somehow discovered Linton's tweeds and had her materials exported to New York and that sort of thing. Now, I don't think the people in the region that we lived in at that time knew about that or knew who Coco Chanel was, because I think if they did, they would have, spoken about it and say, hey, look what Linton's tweeds are doing and how far that's reaching. So it was a tight-knit community. It was in the days of when my dad had the shop. People would come in and just get some groceries, and they'd get it on tick, which meant that they didn't have to pay for it until the end of the week when their husband was paid, and all that was fine and above board. But I guess it was slowly losing its sort of popularity once the supermarkets came into being and people could go uptown and were probably a bit more mobile in terms of having a car, and the shopping could presumably be quite a bit cheaper if they did that sort of thing. And I know there are corner shops now, but I'm talking corner shop of quite an old-fashioned sort of manner. And they don't really exist anymore. And to be fair, there were so many shops in that vicinity. I don't know how they all survived. There was a sweetie shop in the middle of Kendall Street. There was another grocer's shop, Proudfoot's, at the end of Kendall Street. There was my dad's at the Shadongate end. There was somebody on the next street on Newcastle Street who had not a grocer's but a kind of a sweetie shop, really. And then down Shadongate itself, there were a couple of shops, names I don't remember, but shops that really, you don't see those sort of things now. I'm talking about sweetie shops and ice cream shops and that sort of thing. So a real lot of similar stuff in a very confined area. I don't know how they all made a living. Another shop, which was totally different, was called Potter's. There was Potter's the Drapers and Potter's, their brother. This was run by two ladies, and their brother ran the shoe shop. And in fact, the area was named after them because it was called Potter's Place, and the shop was on the front of Shavengate. You go into the shoe shop, and it was like stepping into a different world because it was fitted carpeting that opened out, the room opened out into the back and was quite a fan-shaped area, and all these shoes, you could smell the leather and that sort of thing. So we didn't have to go uptown to get the shop. I get my school shoes there, at least for some of the time. But a very, very old-fashioned shop. Goodness knows how long it had been there for, because the people I remember were really quite old when I left Kendall Street.